Okay, so now we've got all of our pieces positioned in place, stapled in place. I'm going to share with you a few tips on how to get a really nice, neat blanket stitch. And we're going to start off by stitching one of these leaves here, the dark green leaves. So I'll grab my trusty stool here. As I said before, I like to rest my stitching on my knee. Makes me nice and comfy. Needle's already threaded and ready to go. So when I stitch a leaf, I always like to start on the end here. And pull the needle up till that little knot prevents it from coming through. Use my left thumb, keep my thread out of the way. Take a stitch down till I feel my finger and back up through there. Drag my thread across to the left. Use my fingernail of my left thumb just to push that little stitch into place. Left thumb down. What I'm going to do now is pop a little anchor stitch in there. That little anchor stitch is going to prevent the edge of the blanket stitch rolling over the top of the leaf. See how it tugs it in? Like that. What I'm going to do then is come back up, just as if I was starting with that piece of thread again. See where I'm coming up there? Up. Left thumb holding that thread out of the way. What I'm going to do is take my needle down into that same hole. Take a stitch on a 45-degree angle. Left thumb still holding the thread out of the way. And as I pull that thread, I release it from my left thumb and let it just rest gently on the edge of the wool. Thumb down. Another anchor stitch. So I'm taking that needle right down beside that blanket stitch, pulling it through. Release my left thumb and it's tugging it in. Now when you've come up with your needle the next time, you're going to come up on your cotton, but right on the very edge of your wool, in between the stitch that runs along the edge of your wool and the stitch that sits on top of your wool. So what that is actually doing is anchoring it down, and it's going to prevent these edge stitches rolling up on top. You know, sometimes you might see a leaf that's been blanket stitched and at the point one of those stitches rolls up over the top. That will stop that from happening. Now always do that when I'm stitching leaves, going around the outside of a curve, and always when I'm stitching berries I do those little anchor stitches. And sometimes I even get in, I'm in so much of a habit of doing it, I actually get in, when I'm stitching a stem, I'll pop a couple of anchor stitches in, but they really don't need it. So, tiny little stitches. People say, how do I get my stitches nice and even? I'm going to pop a little anchor stitch in there. I say, imagine about 1/8 of an inch, or probably just under 1/8 of an inch. So 1/8 of an inch between each stitch here, and 1/8 of an inch in length here. So I've done that little anchor stitch like I was showing you before, and I'm going to come back up from the bottom of my work and start off again. So it's sort of looping and holding it in underneath. My left thumb is doing all the work there, keeping that thread out of the way. Now if you're a machine appliquer, this can also be machine appliqued using the Aurifil thread, using a 50 weight and using a blanket stitch. You'd still prepare all of your pieces the same way. Trace them out onto your freezer paper, or you might be making your templates from the template paper first. So all the same processes that we've been through today. Position it all the same way, and I still even pop staples in when I'm going to machine applique. Just be a bit mindful of where they sit because you don't want your presser foot going over the top. Going to pop another little anchor stitch in there. But yeah, if you're not a hand sewer, you can always blanket stitch on machine. Nearly to the end. When I get to the end, I'm going to do what I call as a little crow's foot at the end, where I'm going to do a 45-degree stitch on either side of the point and one in the very middle. And I'm going to anchor those 3 stitches down. pop another anchor in there. I probably tend to anchor my stitches a little bit too much, but at least I know then that the edge isn't going to roll up over the top. So nearly at the end. And you see how those staples are out of the way? They're not in the way of my stitching at all because I did position them through the centre of that leaf. That's what you need to be mindful of when you're stapling. And that leaf isn't moving at all. It's glued well, certainly stapled well. Getting a bit closer. Okay, so here's where I'm going to start my 45-degree stitch. Down through to the back of my work. Needle's just caught in that band-aid. We don't want that. Okay, down through to the back of my work. Going to come back up again. Back down into that same hole. I'm going to use my fingernail and my thumb to guide that stitch in and hold it down. One nice thing about this Aurifil thread, it never ever knots. It's so smooth. Just going to spin my work around now so it's closer to me. I'm going to bring my needle up. Back down into that same hole, 45-degree angle. Thumbnail's going to guide it in, down through to the back. And you can see here how it's created a little, what I would refer to as a little crow's foot. So two 45-degree angle stitches there and that little straight one there, all going down into that same hole. And it's been anchored all the way around those points. So this thread here on the side or on the end of the leaf isn't going to come and sit up on top here. And then I would just continue stitching all the way around till I got to the end like I did before. So we're just about ready to finish off this leaf here, just taking an extra couple of stitches. Then we're going to tie off at the back. Remember I said earlier we go back down into that same hole, do that little 45-degree angle stitch. And down we go through to the back of our work and tie off. So I'm just going to turn that over. Grab a couple of threads underneath, pull through. Grab another couple. See, I'm still using my left thumb with that thread. And I'm going to loop my needle through once, twice, and then pull gently, and that's going to pull down into a little knot. And then I'm going to thread that needle through between the leaf, the wool and the cotton fabric. And snip it off with my scissors. So that's that leaf positioned into place. So now it's time to remove the staples. They're really easy to remove, just using my index finger and my thumb, push it up, pop it out, bend it back, and out it will come. Next one, pop it up, bend it back, and out it comes. Simple. So now, I talked to you about those little anchor stitches. When you've got sections on your work where you've got double layers like this centre flower here, and especially here underneath the stem where the little bit comes in underneath the long stem, you're going to pop little anchor stitches all the way through there. Some people like to refer to them as stab stitches, and what that's actually doing is taking it right down through to the back of your work and making those two pieces of wool really stitched together. So always do that where stems are sitting under one another, where you've got multiple layers. When you're stitching through this area here, I'd stab stitch or anchor stitch all the way through here. And that's going to keep those two layers of the wool and the bottom layer of the cotton all together. So that's how simple it is.